Hello everybody, welcome to the webinar. This will be an interesting webinar, a little bit different to our usual ones, and we'll be talking about smart websites. We're looking at the extra value you can add to websites. A lot of us have got web donation pages that just simply collect donations, and today we're looking at some of the more advanced things you might do to more integrate your websites with Donman. And we'll also look at things like social networking and other things you can develop. Paul Ramsbottom, the Managing Director of Asia Pacific, will start it off and talk about smart websites. And then we have Nigel Hodgson from ENGONET who will also talk about their particular take on it, and they can actually develop websites for donors and for people. So I'm going to hand over to Paul now. He'll take over.
Thanks, Andrew, and hi everyone. So this is my first chance to talk with everyone this year in the webcast, and very pleased to do so. Most of my time this year has been working around websites and helping customers with their websites. So I think it's a good presentation topic for me to help present with Andrew and Nigel. We are also very privileged to have a special guest with us today, Nigel Hodgson from ENGONET. And ENGONET are specialist website providers to non-profit organisations. So they really know how websites can work for non-profits, and you'll hear from Nigel after my few points. Now, in terms of our agenda today, we're going to go through these 5 points. We're going to start first with some basics, and I've got the title here of Getting Your House in Order, but really it is more about just getting the basics right and making sure that the basics are right and things are simple. I want to talk a little bit about some research on online versus offline acquired donors and what that might mean for your organisation, which also includes a little touch on the subject of donor journeys or supporter journeys. Then to lead into peer-to-peer fundraising and the online tools available around peer-to-peer fundraising. And then for the last 2 points, I'm going to hand over to Nigel to talk about what online and social engagement means, and to also have him show some of the parts of the ENGONET web platform, to give you an example of the things that we're talking about. So as Marla said, any questions you've got any time, please type it into the panel. I'm sure there will be some questions, and maybe even to share what you found in your own organisations. If you wanted to type that in too, we'd be happy to share that at the end. So the first thing about getting your house in order is to look at your current website and to see if it really does pass the test. And this was from a blog posting of a very frustrated donor who was trying to give money to an organisation, a charity, and just couldn't figure out how to do it easily. And there were some things missing from the web page that really you might look at this and say this is common sense, but it is worth double checking your own website to see that you can tick all these areas. And we should be clear on why I should give money, where my money is going in support. We need to make it easy to make a donation, preferably without having them do a login and with minimal fields. If we are using a third-party payment gateway or some other payment provider where the credit card statement will say something different than your charity name, you need to make that clear so there's no surprises later. And then finally, our privacy statement that you won't rent or sell your information to other charities. So that's a pretty good list. That comes from a donor who was frustrated, and it is just worth going back to your website and checking that those things are there. A couple of examples that do a nice job of this. Firstly is probably the darling of all the online charities right now. It's called Charity Water. I'm sure you've probably heard of it. If you've been to any of the fundraising conferences, they normally make an example of this. And this is a really nice, simple to use form, a donation amount, either a credit card or a PayPal. But look on the right-hand side, right there next to the amount is where does my money go and how does it work. So there's some good examples there on a simple site where the things that were mentioned are are exemplified. And then another example is, this one's from Oxfam in the UK, and they ask for a little bit more information, but you'll see there still it's one single page. It's a simple donation form. You can indicate preferences as well, but importantly on the right-hand side you can see that the information is secure, where your money is going to go, and how you're supporting right there on the donation page as they're doing the donation process. So two nice examples there. Now there was another study done by Jacob Nielsen, and this organisation looks at usability of websites and really makes sure websites are usable. And they did a study last year where they found that it was 7% harder to give money to charities on average than it was to spend on an e-commerce site. An example of that would be an Amazon or an eBay. And when you think about that, when you think about buying on Amazon, you actually have to do a few steps. You've got to find the product, you've got to choose a product, you've got to do shipping details and how it's going to be shipped. There's actually quite a number of steps to go through on Amazon to buy some goods. So for this study to find out that to give a simple donation, just a single amount and a credit card, is harder than an Amazon site is quite surprising, and obviously makes it challenging to get donations in. So a couple of things that they found, really, to put a clear call to action on every page, and secondly, by trying to minimise the number of data fields and choices that a donor has to make as they are going through a donation process. You can get a full link to the site from Jacob Nielsen at that URL there. They also, on the same study, tried to give some further tips, and I'll just show you a handful of those. So on the left-hand side of this slide is the gap as to what they found in websites, and then the right-hand side is the remedy for each of those gaps. So in the first example, not showing what donors want to see on the website. So the remedy to that is to work hard to make sure your mission, goals, the objectives, and how your gift or how the donor's gift is going to be used needs to be clear on the site. Poor site design really can be solved by simple and clean design. They found that if you have local branches or chapters or state offices, that can be confusing if they're different look and feel. So working hard to try and have a common look and feel across state, branch, or chapter sites. And finally, unclear language and just poor writing can be resolved through plain language and really trying to address the questions the donor is going to have. Now the next side about getting your house in order is to make sure that your website is mobile friendly. Now this is becoming more of a tipping point now. Last year we saw on average 1% of donations coming through from mobile sites. This year the number we saw is around 8%. So it's gone from 1% to 8% in the matter of almost less than a year, which is a 8 times increase, and that's probably going to keep growing at a fairly rapid rate. So while it may not have been important last year to have a mobile site, going forward this year, next year and beyond, a mobile site is going to be important. We're also seeing that the average donation from mobile users is about the same, a fraction less, but about the same as those using a regular browser or desktop computer. So they're still just as affluent and just as good a donation from a mobile site as from the desktop site. One easy way to make sure your site is mobile friendly is to have a website that uses responsive design, and that's a new buzzword that really means that the website will resize itself and rearrange itself automatically based on the device. So for a big browser, for a desktop browser, it'll be a big site. If you go to a tablet, it'll rearrange itself, and if you go to a smartphone, it'll shrink down automatically. So let me show you an example. This is just a sample site, but that might be how your home page looks on a big browser, on Safari or Explorer or Chrome. A fairly typical sort of charity website. Now, if I was to go to exactly the same URL, the same website from a smartphone, it will automatically resize look like that. And you don't have to have multiple sites or multiple content. So that's a nice, easy way to make sure that your site can be mobile friendly. And that keyword is called responsive web design. Now, another thing about getting your house in order and to keep things simple is really to think about using video. If you don't use video already, video is very compelling. It's now very cheap to do. You can do YouTube videos from your phone, from a smartphone, from a desktop computer. You can do it very cheaply. And even if you do have to use a professional editor, the costs are in the hundreds of dollars to get that done. It's no longer a $25,000 adventure to do a video. It can be done very easily. We are seeing in our research that donations that come from YouTube links are worth more than a Facebook link. And you can, of course, embed YouTube videos in your emails, in your website, and they can be embedded all around your different networks. So if you're not using video, it's a good way to do so, particularly to show how the money's been used or how the causes is being used to those that have field workers. All right, so that was really some basics around the website. A reminder, if you have questions, please go ahead and type them into the chat box, and we will get to those at the end of the presentation. If you want to share your own experience, please do that as well there too. Now, the next area is online versus offline, and I wanted to just mention this because there's some good research here that I think will help you with your web engagement. And there's always been the question around which are the best channels? Are we better with an online acquisition or an offline acquisition? And then for retention, which channel should we use? So you've probably heard some of the research already around that online acquisition results in a higher first donation, typically a younger donor, typically a wealthier donor. But the challenges are retention rates are lower. People don't stay a donor that come in through online acquisition mechanisms, and there is currently a lower volume compared to offline mechanisms. So probably no surprises there, but that is the research that's consistent around most of the organisations we talk to. And then for the offline channels, which is your traditional channels, the things that we probably already know, that the donation is a lower first donation, an older donor, but very good retention rates. In fact, we see on average around 72% retention rates for donors that donate offline. So that's the two channels. But what the interesting part is that if we can find a way to use multi-channels so that we can cross-pollinate between the online and the offline, the research actually shows that if you can take an online acquired donor and retain them through other offline channels, that you can improve that retention and also improve lifetime value. So that if you can retain through offline channels, we see a 32% increase in response rate and a 30% higher lifetime value across the donor using offline channels in combination with the online channels. So that really is multi-channel marketing at its best. On the flip side, an offline acquired donor being retained online is not seeing the same uplift. So that if you put the arrow the other way and take an offline acquired donor and try and retain them online, we're not seeing the same success in that area. Now, we talked about multi-channel mechanisms for both acquisition and retention, but it's also worth mentioning around the idea that donors themselves can multi-channel or in essence multitask with you. They can play multiple roles. And the research around engagement, and this comes from the Donor-Centrics survey of 2011, the conclusion was that supporters who engage with you in more than one way, that would be both a donor and a volunteer, for example, are worth more in lifetime value and last longer than a single activity supporter. So someone that only gives or someone that only volunteers. So you might wonder why I have this point in a discussion around websites. And the important point is that your website needs to support these types of things. So if you're trying to increase multitasking of supporters and you have a current donor, you'd want to make sure that your website is going to find ways to encourage them to become active in other areas, for example, to volunteer or to become a bequest prospect, because we know that if they engage in more than one way, they will become a better lifetime donor. So that really leads into a discussion on supporter journeys, and I just want to give you one quick example on supporter journeys for a customer of ours in the UK, which is the Scripture Union, and they had a supporter journey that they thought looked like this, that they really worked hard to get a first gift through their website, and that typically was a merchandising purchase, so purchasing a product or a gift card or some sort of merchandising from their website, and then they would move to becoming either a giver or a volunteer, and then ultimately, in typical donor pyramid style, to pledge a bequest. But what they found is when we analysed their actual transaction data, and we looked at their donor data over a period of years, and this is a spreadsheet showing their actual data and their actual journeys, and the first column there is the first step of the journey. So they can come into Scripture Union through a number of ways. The second column is the number of donors that came in by that way, and the third column is the average lifetime value of that donor. So they found 53,000, almost half of their donors came in through a first sale from their website, so a purchase of a gift card or some sort of merchandising, and quite a low lifetime value. But then what happened is when they looked at what was their next step, and they expected that at least that first sale might have been a lost leader into a regular giver or a cash giver. When we break that out and then look at the second step, more than 80% of those first sale donors, in fact 43,000 of those first sale donors did nothing. So it was actually a lost opportunity, and it was a complete surprise to them to see such a low result. So again, think of the website and what that means from the website. How can the website support a better result from this thing? If they give a first gift, how do we keep them engaged to take them beyond a second step of none? So again, it's just worth looking back at your website and trying to target the engagement of your donors, and is your website supporting your donor journey that you think it should be supporting? Another surprise to Scripture Union was those that became a committed giver on the very first step. And while there was only a small number, only 3,000 or so did that, the lifetime value of that committed giver was dramatically higher. In fact, it was 20 times higher than someone that bought a first sale by merchandising. And their website did not even allow from the home page someone to become a committed giver from the home page. So they were able to quickly change some of their website content and call to actions, and to ask for a committed giver up front instead of asking for a merchandising purchase. So there's a lot of answers in your data even today, and we can pull some of this data from your Donman transactions to see where you might be having to spend your time or have your focus of your website to keep those donors engaged and get beyond the first step of the donor journey. The last point on engaging donors too, and the main thing to look at here is the variable gift array. The variable gift arrays have been a staple of direct mail campaigns for many years, and don't forget that you can do this too on your website. Once a donor actually logs in and returns to your website as a committed donor and engage with you by the website, you can also offer variable gift arrays based on their donor history in real time, so that you don't present a poor or a nonsense style of gift array for a donor that might be either a high or a low donor. So that can be done in real time as they come to the website. All right, so that's the topic of online versus offline acquired donors covered there. Really, as far as your website content and website engagement needs to address. The last topic for me is on peer-to-peer fundraising. And just before I get into that, I just wanted to show you some statistics. This comes from the UK. And while this chart looks a little colourful or graphical. I want to explain it because it's an important graph. The red people or the burgundy people represent people that come to your website as a result of email referrals. So they've got an email and they've clicked from an email and come to your website. The blue people are the percentage of people that come to your website from a Facebook post. And then there's the green and the yellow and the red at the end, which are fairly small right now. So let's just focus on the burgundy, the email, and the blue, which is the Facebook. Then the left-hand axis is the X, Y, and Z generation. So X generation being the 45 years and above, the Gen Y's being in the middle there, and the Gen Z's, the millennials, 24 and under. So you'll see for the bulk of the 30 or so year olds, the Y's and the X's, the bulk of those referrals to your website are coming from email. So email is still a very important mechanism to have people engage with you and then come to your website. But for the Gen Z, email is almost not relevant, and you'll see majority of the referrals to your website are coming from Facebook. And so when you think about Facebook, which is a social network, it really is just like word of mouth. It's just an online version of word of mouth, which has always been one of your strongest channels of acquisition is word of mouth. And so the Facebook, it really is, in a way, it is peer-to-peer fundraising, even though it may not be event fundraising. So what you'll see on a typical donate page, on the left-hand side we're showing the Guide Dog Foundation here. So there's a typical donate page. It's really important we find ways to have someone that donates to be able to share their experience with their friends on Facebook. So now one way to do that is to have a share button on your website. So on the donate page or on some of your call to action pages, you can put a share button that lets your donors share that page with their friends on Facebook. And that's easy to do, and you should be doing that already. But that still requires the donor to push a button, to click that link to make it happen. It's not automatic. They've got to remember to do that. Another option is to use login with Facebook. And this is a way where they can come to your website and they actually log into your website with their Facebook login. And by doing that, it gives your website some automatic access to their Facebook timeline. So that when that happens, automatically activities that happen on your website can get reposted onto the Facebook timeline so that all your donors, friends and supporters and family will see their activity with you. Of course, with privacy controls, which is managed by the donor, but the process is much more automatic. So the login with Facebook is a very powerful way to have that happen automatically on your donors and supporters' Facebook sites to their own network. And that really is, in a way, peer-to-peer fundraising. All the research is showing today that Facebook is working already. In fact, it's the only social network that's working reliably. And there's a number of ways you can do that. I'm sure you've seen many of these on your own links right now. So we mentioned logging with Facebook. They're sharing a story. There's commenting on pages. There's like a page. There's liking an article from your website. Sharing a link from your website. So all those things are there today, and we are seeing, particularly in the Gen Zs and the Gen Ys, a large number of referrals from Facebook back to your own websites. And that's why that first topic was important. You've got to make sure your website is basically correct, the house in order, so you can get these donations through. And the other comment on peer-to-peer fundraising is it doesn't have to be events. It doesn't have to be walkathons or runathons or climbs. You can actually do a number of things, and there's a couple of examples here. The Do It for Cancer was just basically do anything. You choose your own idea. You choose your own type of fundraising you want to do, and you can create your own sites and web pages to do that. Another great example is the David Suzuki Foundation on the right-hand side there, and that was a campaign around where will Santa live when the oceans start to rise. So that was a nice, fun campaign. Again, they weren't really events, but they definitely are peer-to-peer fundraising, working off the back of the social networks of your donors and fundraisers. So with that brings me to the end of my topics. That really is a lead-in now to some introductory ideas about how you might do it for real now on your own website. So I'm going to hand across now to Nigel Hoken, who's the Managing Director of ENGONET, and they are specialist website providers to non-profits. So I'll just switch presentations and I'll introduce Nigel.
Okay, hello everyone. Thanks Paul for the introduction. So as Paul said, my name is Nigel Hoken. I'm the Managing Director of a newly established company called ENGONET. So I'll tell you a little bit about ENGONET and then I'll tell you a little bit about myself and then we'll jump into the presentation. So ENGONET was started as a web platform company that provides a platform for the not-for-profit sector to do a lot of the capabilities that Paul has just spoken about in regard to having intelligently designed sites, having intelligent ways of collecting information from users and encouraging them to take action, and having integration between mobile and your social media networks on a single platform. So that's our purpose as a company, and that's what we do. So a little bit about me. So I've been in the IT sector for the last 15 years. The last 8 of those I've worked at Microsoft, predominantly in the commercial sector. And the last 4 years of that, we were looking after the enterprise business here in Victoria. So my experience is predominantly commercial, but what's really fascinating is the not-for-profit sector has a lot of similarities with the commercial sector in the challenges of how they have engagement with their audience in a new world of social networks and so forth. So I'm just going to jump in, and I'm sure I'll get pinged if there are any questions along the way, and I think we've actually got 10 minutes at the end for us to have a little bit of free-form Q&A. So what I want to go through is talking about the changing face of engagement, and we'll take a historical view of that and talk in particular about how the last 10 to 15 years have really changed the way that organisations engage with their audience. We'll talk about the rise of social engagement and scratch a little bit deeper than the earlier presentation. We'll then talk about the doorways to online engagement. So we talk a lot about websites, but websites, as we know, is really only one part of your overall web ecosystem. And we'll talk about what that means for modern not-for-profit organisations. We'll talk about then the ENGONET web platform for not-for-profit. So this is a cloud-based platform which provides you the ability to do a lot of the capabilities that we've just spoken about for the last half hour. And then we'll talk about how to get started with ENGONET and talk a little bit about the integrations that we're building with Donman, which all of you are using today. So the first section, talking about the changing face of engagement. So if you look at a timeline of how organisations, both profit and non-for-profit organisations, have engaged with consumers and their audience. Back in the days of Mad Men, and I'm overexposed to Mad Men at the moment because my partner loves it. I'm less fond of it, but I know all the characters. It was a more simple time. Engagement was about print, or print advertising, radio advertising, and television was the big disruptor in the 1960s. So it was a model whereby the concept of interrupt and repeat was, I guess, the term coined. And it was whereby engagement happened through talking to your audience at a time when their focus was already on something that they were interested in, and then repeating that until your message sunk in. It was really simple, really, really effective for about 30 years. But then, of course, things started to change. So call center marketing became really popular in the 1990s. And what's really important and the big disruptor in the 90s was web. So the introduction of web was really the first mechanism where engagement with your audience could happen on a pool basis. So they could decide that they wanted to know more about you rather than you forcing them to listen to you during something else they might want to do. And it was very simple back then, of course. It was a basic website with a little bit of picture and word content, and you could consume as much or as little as you wanted at that point in time. But it was a fundamental shift. And of course, what's happened in the last 20 years is the emergence of a raft of other quite disruptive engagement technologies. Email marketing, which today still is the most popular form of engagement, social media, of course, and emerging mobile. So Gartner, which is an analyst in the IT space, recently released a study saying that by 2014, most web traffic will actually be generated from mobile devices as opposed to a traditional PC or laptop. And that's really quite revolutionary, and it's only 2 years away, or less than 2 years away. So we have to be ready to engage with your audience using mobile platforms. So what is the consequence of all of these disruptions? The consequence is fragmentation of the media. And what this means is that the formerly successful interrupt and repeat communication mechanism is a lot less effective now than it used to be. Studies indicate that compared to the 80s, television advertising only has about 1/4 of the effectiveness as it does today, and that carries through to print and radio as well. So consequently, organisations are losing the power to control the communication agenda. So just because you may have, a big wallet and you can go and, saturate the market with a message via traditional communication mechanisms, doesn't mean that your smaller competitors can't also have a voice via these other mechanisms like email, like social media, and like mobile. And consequently, and what I'm sure a lot of you are experiencing, is existing patrons are less loyal to brands and causes, and there is a lot more chop and change on that front. So if you think about this in terms of an engagement paradigm for not-for-profit in particular, there are some things that you need to do now that perhaps have been different from what organisations have done in the past. Today, it's about having a conversation with your audience as opposed to telling your audience in a one-way kind of fashion. It's about providing information that's relevant to them as opposed to a massive advertising campaign that's not customized and not interesting for an individual given their specific interest areas. It's about involving people in your cause rather than telling people what your cause is and hoping that they like it, which is a more distant kind of model. It's about giving people experiences as opposed to giving people the opportunity simply to transact. And I think Paul spoke about charity water as one of the really groundbreaking charities that help embed people in the experience of giving. And finally, it's about soliciting feedback and being very active in that as opposed to simply defending a position that you might already have. And that, in particular, is an area where a lot of not-for-profit organisations have struggled, in particular the religious-based charities. But it's a different paradigm now, and particularly with a younger audience, having that ongoing circular feedback loop is incredibly important. And the really great thing from an online perspective is online does give you all of these avenues to have bi-directional engagement. So it can be a conversation as opposed to a one-way type of engagement. So we'll talk now just briefly about the rise of social media, and we won't harp on this too much because I'm sure you've all been to 1,000 different presentations on the importance of social media. But if you think back to web, we spoke about that, really emerged in the 90s as a popular platform. A lot of theorists came up with engagement models to help people understand how that would work for them in an organisation. And a really simple one came forward that was an adaptation of the Kirkpatrick 4-level evaluation model. And that was one of click, consume, comprehend, act. So you click on the website, you consume the static content that's there, you understand it, and if it resonates, you act. Nice and simple, moderately effective, but it doesn't carry through to today. So what we've seen with social media and mobile computing is very significant disruption to the last 2 steps, and this is important not-for-profit to understand. Whilst people do still click and consume content that they find on the web through all the different mechanisms, or different ecosystems that you'll have on the web, it's no longer about simple comprehension and acting. It's about interacting with the information that's there. It's about personalizing it so that the information is relevant to yourself. And it's about sharing that with people that you trust to get their feedback. And that forms a loop before action is ultimately taken in a lot of circumstances. And that's where, unfortunately, the online strategy for a lot of not-for-profits falls short. A lot of online still are in the mode, a lot of not-for-profits are still in the mode of the click, consume, comprehend, act. And the more successful ones, like Charity Water and a variety of others, even some Australian ones like the Movember just some stats, and I won't stay on this for too long, but look, I'm sure everyone by now is aware that social media is not just for the young. More than half of Australians now have an active Facebook account. More than half of Australians consume video via YouTube, and a good proportion are blogging and using Twitter and using LinkedIn, and those continue to grow exponentially compared to standard standard media platforms. So from Deloitte and also from a research firm called Common Knowledge, those not-for-profit organisations who have already invested in capability to have a community on Facebook and Twitter saw those communities grow 30 and 81% respectively in 2012. And that's just enormous in terms of the growth in awareness of your not-for-profit. Secondly, the average Facebook like was worth $214 in individual giving to those organisations. Again, that's a stunning return on investment and a great way to acquire a donor for the first time. And just finally, LinkedIn and Pinterest obviously were the big areas that people are looking at for growth in 2013. So I want to talk briefly about the 3 doorways of online engagement. And we do talk a lot about websites, but websites are really only one way that potential new donors or new people that you want to support through your not-for-profit are going to find you. So we've spoken about responsive web design and the critical importance of that. So your website absolutely is one of those vectors where people will arrive at your, within your web ecosystem, and it is your most important. That's where the bulk of your content will be. It's where people will take action, like donating or like signing up for an event. But increasingly, mobile sites are an important way where people will find you for the first time. And if their experience is poor when they find you on a mobile site, they're not going to give you the time of day. There are too many other not-for-profits or competing interest areas for them that do have capability in this area that they can engage with. And finally, social media. Again, we've spoken a lot about it, but it's not just having a Facebook site and a Twitter site. It's about having integration of those social media platforms right across your web ecosystem. So having those social media capabilities embedded in your mobile capabilities, embedded in your responsive website, and all of them talking to one another in harmony is what produces the action. So if you think about ecosystems, and I've found a very pretty clip art picture of an island here. I think this is a bit cheesy, but the concept is we don't believe in islands of content or islands of capability. We believe in ecosystems which have shared capability. So each environment, so you think about web, mobile, and social media, each serves a different and unique purpose, and each serves a subtly different demographic as well. Each environment is needed to maintain an ecosystem that addresses the engagement preference of the broadest audience. So if you think about your Gen X's, Gen Y's, they're going to be really comfortable across pretty much all 3 of these platforms, but in particular the social media outlets. You think about those in the later age demographics, yes, you still will send them mail, but they're very comfortable around email and basic web capability. So your ecosystem needs to be able to speak to every person in your audience in a way that they're comfortable with. And finally, each environment must be in harmony, which means that they have to share content and agree with one another in what they're asking people to do, and be clear on their role in the ecosystem. So for example, social media is a more informal mechanism to communicate with your audience, and a lot of the intent around it is to build engagement, two-way engagement, that directs people back to a site so that they can take action. So back to your website to become a donor, become a recurring donor, participate in an event, do social media fundraising, and so forth. So that's what we mean when we say an ecosystem. So I want to talk to you a little bit now about the platform itself and how a well-thought-out platform and a well-implemented platform can help you achieve some of those goals. So we've spoken already about those 3 major areas or arenas, essentially, for your overall web ecosystem. Now, the important thing about a platform is that a platform will enable you mobile users, and it should be able to synchronize content on Facebook and Twitter with what you're displaying in those other areas, but also provide unique types of content onto Facebook and Twitter as well. So this is where ENGONET comes in, and this is the offering that we've built. So we have a cloud-based service which provides core platform services and applications that are relevant to the not-for-profit sector. And I'll talk to you just a little bit more about what that actually means. So if you think about core service, and this is where it just gets a little bit more technical, so bear with me as I go through this. So on a cloud platform, you need to be able to provide services that enable you to run these websites and mobile sites and social media. So the core element of that is called multi-channel content management. So it's a single platform that allows you to control the content that you're displaying on web, mobile, and social media, and in particular Facebook and Twitter. And not just share the same content, but share content that's specifically tailored for those platforms. So as an example, if you had a news article, and let's say it was 4 or 5 paragraphs long, you'll want to show all of that on your website, and maybe you'll want to show a picture on the website as well as that news article, which is fine. And that is what you would enter into the ENGONET platform, and that would then be syndicated out to your website. For your mobile site, it would be the same, but it would be laid out differently. But you don't want to have to retype in that news article onto a different platform. It still needs to come from the same platform. And then you think about social media. So with Twitter, you know that you can only use, I think, just 140 characters or thereabouts. So you want the platform to be able to automatically populate Twitter with the headline of the article plus a link back to your website. And for Facebook, it's different again. Facebook, you want to maybe provide the headline, maybe the first paragraph, and then a link again back to your website. So all of that kind of capability is wrapped up in what we call multi-channel content management, and that's provided on our core platform. Identity and permission management, of course, is important. You need to be able to know who's coming into the site, and for those that want to have a deeper engagement with you, you need to be able to log their identity and give them permission to access certain areas. So we cater for that. Structured data management allows you to create directories of searchable content on your overall web presence, and that specifically relates to your mobile site and your website. So an example of what structured data management might be is that could be a job listing directory, or it could be a directory of services that are available through your organization, or it could even be, so one of our clients has implemented a directory of cancer types and given information about those directories, and that's searchable and, and referenceable outside of that data environment. So those are just some examples of how structured data management can work effectively on a website. And finally, and this is a really important one, a lot of not-for-profits feel that they haven't been able to execute secure payment and gateway integration within their own web ecosystem. They'll often redirect it out to a third-party environment, as Paul spoke about it. And in some cases that works, but in a lot of cases it's not optimal. Sometimes you just do want people to know that they're transacting directly with your organization, and the money's going directly to your organization with no fee deducted along the way. So what our platform does is it enables direct integration from your site to your payment gateway provider, which typically in Australia would be one of the big 4 banks. And that's all managed again on our platform with all of the information being recorded securely and held as appropriate by privacy standards in Australia. So that's the core platform. Applications are where people get to engage with you and get to participate in services that your organization might want to offer. So at its most basic level, an application can be online donation acceptance. It sounds nice and simple to do a one-off donation, but it also can enable you to do things like allow people to set up recurring payments or recurring donations. It can allow people to donate to specific causes as opposed to general donations, and all of that is configurable by the platform, and again, that gets exposed out through the various elements of your web ecosystem. Events and registration. A lot of organizations in the not-for-profit sector hold events as a way to raise money, but it's really hard for end users to register and provide the information to that not-for-profit given the current level we provide this in a really easy to manage module on our platform. You can set up events, you can allow people to register and pay for events, and manage that process in an end-to-end fashion, send them email alerts and so forth when the event is coming up. You can tie events into social fundraising, and I'm just going to skip that just for a moment because I've got an example on the next page that I'll talk to you about, so I'll come back to that. Membership management is an element of our platform. So a lot of not-for-profits, and not-for-profits also extend beyond charities, the associations, clubs and so forth, need to maintain information about members, and they need to be able to accept new memberships and subsequent payments, and also membership renewals and payments associated with that. So we enable this on the platform. Online store is something that, again, sounds quite basic, but it's one of the areas that a lot of not-for-profits unfortunately overlook. It's a great way to fundraise, particularly around any kind of festive period. If you can buy a gift on behalf of a friend and let that friend know that that transaction has happened, and they get a really nice experience around that. So just as an example, it's usually around intangible things. If you're a not-for-profit who raises money for third world hunger, as an example, a gift could be a goat, for example. You're actually not going to buy a goat for a village, but you're going to donate $50 or $100, which will allow your organisation to buy a goat for a village, and the person who receives that gift actually has a clear understanding of where their money has gone and has a feel-good kind of sense around that. So that's the kind of capability that's enabled through a well-implemented online store. And finally, directories, which we've spoken about. And we have other applications coming in the new calendar year, which, for those interested, I can share with you a little bit later. So just on the social fundraising example, I want to talk to you about how that works, because it's one of the most important areas where cutting-edge not-for-profits are able to really put a boost into the fundraising efforts of the organisation. So I'm just going to take you on a little workflow, or a little flow for a visitor of how they would engage with your site in that respect. So a visitor arrives at your website or mobile site. They may be known to you, they may be unknown. They see that you have an event coming up, and that event might be a fun run being held by your charity, as an example. Because you have the event capability, they can actually sign up to participate and record all of their information there. And you might charge them $50 to go in the event, and that's their contribution, or that's their charitable contribution to do that, which is great. Now, a lot of organisations stop there, but it's a massive lost opportunity. So where this can go is a visitor discovers that they can be sponsored for participating in that event. So if I'm going to go and do this fun run, I might want my work colleagues and my family to sponsor me, and obviously that money goes through to the charity. So I use my social media integration that's embedded in my website or the mobile site to invite friends and colleagues to sponsor me and let them know about the event. And the subsequent action is that some of those people that receive that invitation will in fact donate and will sponsor you. But some of them will also stay on the site, learn a little bit more about the event, get excited about it, and want to participate. So it's this kind of theory of a virtuous cycle of social fundraising that can really supercharge the amount of fundraising your organisation can do, leveraging not just your contacts, but your contacts' contacts. So I'm basically got 2 minutes, so I'm going to rush through the last couple of slides here. So the consequence of doing this well is you can increase your marketable audience through using the contacts of your supporters. You can increase the number and value of your donors. You can increase the new donor acquisition rate, and finally increase the participation rates for events and volunteering. So all of those things are really important because it does cost you money to obviously set up these events and fundraising. So you want to get the maximum return on that investment. A couple of people, or a couple of organisations I should say, who do this exceptionally well today. November raised $124 million last year, and I think it's just closed this year, so that number is likely to have gone up. And they are cutting edge in their use of web, Facebook, Twitter applications and getting that out there virally into the social networks. Now this is a charity that started in 2005, I believe, so they haven't been around for long, and they far surpass anyone else in the level of sophistication with which they EMEA Foundation is another good local example, actually, who do this well with a Shave for a Cure. I actually participated in this last year, this year. And it's a fun activity that you use social media to sort of track your progress along the way. Have photos of your shaved head on Facebook forever, which is not a good thing. But it's exciting. People get, really excited about donating to it and so forth. And that, again, uses social media as a core platform for doing that. Just finally, around integration, so ENGONET and ASI are in a partnership to integrate the ENGONET capability into Donman, so you can keep your donor records up to date, transactions and campaigns all up to date, without having to rekey, essentially, or duplicate information that's received by the front end of your web ecosystem to the back end of your management. So just finally on getting started, look, understand what your organization's vision is for online engagement. To be frank, a lot of organizations don't have a clear vision in this space, and that's where there are a lot of people who can help you in that regard. Have some ideas about how you might integrate some of these social workflows into your online environment. And finally, this is our not too thoughtful pitch, have a chat to us about how you can do that. We're really keen to talk to organizations who are ready to make that step into a more sophisticated web presence, and we believe that we can do that in a way that's quite economical and will produce a guaranteed outcome. So here are my details. I'll hopefully be able to have either myself or ASI just send you a note with my contact details after this session. But I would love to have a chat to you and talk to you about what ENGONET can do. We're a Victorian, Melbourne, Victoria-based organisation, but we obviously can work more broadly than that. So thank you for your time, and I think it's now time for Q&A.
So, thank you, Nigel. We'll get back to our last slide here. This webcast was recorded, so it will be available to you to share to your peers at your organisations after the recording goes up, and it'll be also a reminder in our monthly newsletter. So I'll hand back to Marla now for any questions.
Thanks, Paul. Just a reminder to everyone, if you do have any questions in the last few minutes before we finish up, you can log them in the question pane, which is on the control panel. So you just need to reopen that question pane with the little orange grab tab arrow, and you can ask your questions there. But I'll start. There's one from Danielle to start with, and I'll quickly just mention that apart from the recording of the presentation, a few people have asked for the presentation notes today, and yes, we can make that available. So just drop me a question in the box, and I'll make sure that they're sent to you after today's presentation. So a question from Danielle for Nigel was, does the ENGONET platform have an ability for people to create their own fundraising pages?
Yes, absolutely. So you don't necessarily need an event to be set up for that. Let me just talk through an example that we've recently implemented for another not-for-profit organisation. So they have, they're doing a walk up Mount Kosciuszko, and that's their signature event for 2013. I've actually registered to participate as a user, so I'm a little bit horrified because I'm going to have to do some training now, unfortunately. But after registration, I got my own fundraising page set up. I got a link sent to me in email that I could send out to my social media contacts. And that's my personal page now that will track my fundraising. It will have a photo of me. It will have a little message from me. And I can post regular updates on how I'm progressing as well. So that's one version. But you can also do that in isolation of an event. So the not-for-profit doesn't necessarily need to have an event for me to be able to go in and set up my own fundraising page. I may just unilaterally decide to go and do a marathon, and I want to do it for a particular cause. So our platform enables that to happen all within your own ecosystem as opposed to going out to a third-party provider, that kind of capability. Does that answer the question?
Yes, I think so. Just a lot of people just requesting the presentation notes. So at the moment, no other questions have been posted. So I'll just give people a couple more minutes in case they do have any questions. And I'll just run through some details. As Paul mentioned, all our webcasts are recorded and put on our website. So you go to the Donman website and then go to What's New, and they're posted there. And this one should be there in the next couple of days, and we'll certainly let you know as well. No, it doesn't look like there's any more questions there, so we'll wrap it up. As you can see on the screen, there's our web address and our email address. So if you do have any further questions after today, you can certainly email us on info@donman.net.au. Thank you, Andrew, Paul and Nigel, for the presentation today. And just a reminder as well to find the details and links in our newsletter as well for the recorded webcast. So this is our final webcast for the year, and I just want to take the opportunity to wish everybody the best for the festive season on behalf of our team. And also thank you for your attendance and participation in our webcast this year. We've had some really great feedback from everyone, and we're really pleased that you've enjoyed them and been able to join us each month. And of course, keep an eye out in your inbox in 2013 for our program of webcasts, which we'll bring to you then. So thank you again for joining us today. And just, yes, reiterating, yes, we will have webcasts again in 2013, and we'll have it in our January newsletter, details of that. So thank you again, and that concludes our webcast for today. So we hope to see you again next year. Thank you, and goodbye.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you.